Good morning, folks. I'm coming to you a little bit earlier than normal today, and I'll tell you why that is in just a moment. I went to bed with one idea for the format of the show today and woke up with another idea, and so we're just going to go with it live and uncut this morning, and I'll tell you exactly what's going on. Have you ever noticed that seminal events in your life, or even events that aren't so important, often have downstream effects reaching far along the time continuum? COVID is a great example of that. We still see effects from COVID all around us today, wherever we look in many different areas. Well, 20 years ago, we had a child 6 weeks early. He came early and was faced with a whole host of issues. One of those was a massive hole in the center of his heart, and he had to get heart surgery 6 weeks after that, about the time he originally was scheduled to be born. And so 20 years later, we still have cardiology appointments due to that and a few other anomalies there. And we've got one such appointment today. You've seen him on this channel a few times. Cold Drizzle is his weather name, and so we do videos together occasionally. But today we are traveling together, taking a long trip back east and heading to a cardiology appointment. So please be in prayer for that, help that we can get there and back safely, and that the appointment goes well and we continue to see good news. We've seen good news the last several ones, and that's great. And so we'll continue to pray for that. And now, by the way, you have something to be thankful for. You don't have to go see the cardiologist today. Well, maybe you do. If you do, let me know in the comments right down below, and I'll pray for you for that too. But certainly, we have a lot to be thankful for, don't we? We always have a balancing act in life. We try to find the area of life where it's the least stress, the least painful, and things just sort of work, and that's what we strive for. And I certainly strive for that. We all do. The atmosphere does too, and the atmosphere is usually out of balance, and that's why we tend to see weather, because the atmosphere tries to get back in balance. And one of the mechanisms it uses to get back in balance is thunderstorms, and we've seen a lot of thunderstorms, and certainly a lot of those thunderstorms have been severe over the past several days. One of the things that we look at when we talk about thunderstorms is instability, and I'll show you that here. You can see that kind of in the background. That's what you've been watching flash back and forth here. I'll stop it so we can get to where we want to go here. But instability is simply a measure of potential energy. When you lift air at the surface, if it is warmer than the air around it, it will continue to rise. Warm air rises, cool air sinks, and when you understand that, a lot of things in the weather world make sense, right? And so air wants to continue to rise, and it will accelerate upward, and the magnitude of that acceleration is determined by the magnitude of the temperature differential, in part, around that air parcel. As long as the atmosphere is cooler around it, it will continue to accelerate upward. And sometimes you have a great differential in temperature and you get great instability and great acceleration. And instability is not the end all be all to severe weather, but it's a big part of it. And it is potential, though. That's the thing that is key here. When I show you instability, it doesn't mean that there are thunderstorms that are going to develop, but it means if they do, they have the potential. There's potential in the atmosphere for acceleration, and potentially large acceleration in some spots. This map that we look at, I show it routinely. Here's a measure of instability, and you can see those bright colors. Greens are unstable, blacks down here at the legend. You probably can't see the legend, but if I roll this along this afternoon, look at this. Black show up. That's extreme instability. Doesn't mean you're going to see thunderstorms, though. If you take a spring, this is why we call this convective available potential energy. You need thunderstorms to turn that potential energy into kinetic energy, and where you see extreme instability, once that process gets underway, you get vigorous updrafts, vigorous acceleration. You have all kinds of hazardous weather, potentially very large hail, destructive winds, even tornadoes if the lower levels of the atmosphere are right. Does that make sense? I hope it helps understand the mechanism a little bit. It's like a spring. If you take a spring, put it in your hand, there's nothing there. If you take it and squeeze it a little bit, now you have potential energy, but it's still not doing anything until you let it go. You squeeze it real tight all the way down, you got a lot of energy. That's what's going on with the atmosphere here. So if we take a look at this over the next couple of days, give you an idea where the best instability is, where you might see the most severe weather. and only part of it, but gives you a good proxy. And there are several different flavors of instability, but this is a good proxy for instability for our purposes here. So you got this big area up here, the northern plains, where you have extreme instability this afternoon. You got another little area down here in the southeast where we have potential for thunderstorms too. And so where there's potential for thunderstorms, you have to get something to kick off that thunderstorm activity. Make use of that instability. A cold front can do it, scoop up the air at the surface, make it rise. You can have boundaries from previous night's convection or earlier in the day, and that can help too. Where you have a cloud layer and a sunny layer right next to it, right? You get differential heating. The sunny area heats up a little bit more quickly, and so you have some differential heating, and that can often lead to rising motion, making use of instability in the atmosphere. Mid-level energy can help pull air up from the surface. If you go stand in a pool, put your hands half in the pool and half out and spread them away real fast, you get welling up of water, and that's kind of what happens in the atmosphere. So a lot of different mechanisms drive this, a lot of complexity to it. That's why it's hard to predict exactly where thunderstorms might form and how strong they will be, but this gives you an idea. So up here in the Central Plains, working into Minnesota later today, we've got a lot of instability up here as we go on through the nighttime hours, lose the heating of the day, and you start to see that go away, and then it comes back again tomorrow afternoon. Shifts on off to the east, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Nebraska, and back into the mid-Mississippi Valley here, and then over into the southeast. We see those reds, pretty strong instability, and so plenty of unstable air around as we get on in through Saturday. Now, if we take a look at another component that's important to us is moisture in the atmosphere, precipitable water. We've been looking at this too. A lot of moisture. Look at this over the southeast. We saw torrential downpours yesterday, quite a number of severe wind reports with some of these storms too, but look at this high water content. Had 2 inches of rain here at the house last night in about an hour. So these thunderstorms in the south are capable of putting down torrential rains, hence the flood watches that have been out there. And watch this as we go on through the next several days, Friday into Saturday, starts to get shunted off to the south and east, the main axis of the moisture. But again, as we roll it on through the weekend, plenty of moisture still down here along the Gulf Coast and the far southeast, along the southeast coast, and another batch of moisture being drawn up. We've got a big Bermuda high sitting off here, and it is just funneling in moisture right out of the Gulf of cold rain. You get a little systems coming in. They help direct the flow out of the south, or have a southerly component to the flow anyway, and you get those troughs coming in, helping to bring in more moisture. So we'll see that process repeat over the next few days. If we look at high temperatures, with going to have instability, generally you need warm air, and we have a lot of warm air this afternoon, 90s all the way up to the Canadian border. Very, very warm in the desert southwest, across the southern tier of the nation, hot here in the southern plains, approaching 100. Florida's hot. Only cool spots up here in the northern Great Lakes and up into the northern northeast, and maybe back in the Pacific Northwest, where you've got a little trough coming in there. And later on, we're going to see a trough work out of Canada and start to cool us off across the northern tier. So that's going to cool you down. It's been hot up there. You're going to start to see 70s as we get on into tomorrow as that trough works in, and it's going to kick the severe weather threat east. Again, cool in the northeast and warm across the south, 90s everywhere except for the desert southwest, San Joaquin Valley in the hundreds out here. But looking at the severe threat this afternoon, check this out. So we've got marginal risk. That means isolated to widely scattered thunderstorms possible. Slight risk back from western Iowa into eastern Nebraska and west central Kansas. That's where we're going to see the most concentration, or have the highest confidence that there will be severe weather, clusters of storms, potentially supercells, a couple of tornadoes, and then isolated up here in the northeast and in the southeast too, with precipitation loading, fueling wet microbursts. And there's a little bit of extra flow in the atmosphere with some little pockets of energy moving through. And you'll see that help organize a couple of clusters of thunderstorms, maybe organizing the wind damage. There's your tornado threat. There's boundary setting up here where we've seen previous convection lay sort of a boundary here, and thunderstorms begin to form later today. Supercells move along that boundary and through central Iowa. We could see a couple of spin-ups of tornadoes, about 2% chance there. Wind is the primary threat, and hail is also a threat, where we have decreasing temperature rapidly with height, and that helps as those updrafts, those violent updrafts go up. They suspend those hailstones, and those hailstones just circulate around. They build and build, and you get bigger hail through those thunderstorms. Tomorrow, much the same story here in the northeast, all the way down to the southeast, down to Columbia, South Carolina, almost into Augusta, Georgia. We could see isolated to widely scattered severe thunderstorm reports, but the biggest concentration, southern Iowa, back into northern and western Illinois and northern Missouri, just the northeast tip of Kansas here, where we're looking for that boundary to kind of come down and help provide a better focus for showers, thunderstorms, a little bit of energy aloft, maybe help organize a few of those. There's the tornado threat as storms track along that boundary. A little bit more spin and wind and hail tomorrow out here in the plains is a good bet too in spots. Now, we saw plenty of severe weather reports today, or yesterday as it were, up and down the eastern seaboard. This is one area we were looking for severe weather. We saw a lot of wind reports out here, several back in the plains too. Another area we were looking for severe weather as well. And taking a look here at how the radar is going to play out over the central plains this afternoon, check this out. So we get on into mid-afternoon, start to see thunderstorms develop as we approach the late afternoon hours, 4, 5 o'clock, and you start to see supercells here coming together and forming, moving off into little clusters. We'll probably see a line segment later on from Nebraska into Iowa, little clusters tracking along that boundary. So watch out as we get on into the mid-evening hours or so for potential tornadoes, and be dark so at that time, so you probably won't see anything. So you have to stay weather aware with the weather radio, have your phone handy, keep it charged so you can receive weather alerts. Everything kind of dies down a little bit. May see that some of that activity persist into Friday morning, and then we going out through Friday afternoon. Wash, rinse, repeat just a little farther east, eastern South Dakota, and up here in Minnesota, back into northwest Illinois, into Iowa, northern Missouri, and look at that, northeast Kansas, right where we have the threat. That's pretty good placement by the Storm Prediction Center, assuming this future radar is right, and we have another little cluster of showers and thunderstorms innocuous back here coming into the plains, but that'll all die out again. We may see 1 or 2 clusters hold together through the overnight hours. As we look over toward the east, general shower and thunderstorm activity today, though the coverage is much less. We get into early afternoon, seeing those thunderstorms pop up all up and down the eastern seaboard, and eventually here in North Carolina down into Georgia, we may see a few clusters come to play in South Carolina as well. So you see one there working through the sand hills toward Chapel Hill and Raleigh, down in toward Greenville, Spartanburg, and everything eventually dies off as we get on into the nighttime hours down here. No energy working through that would keep things maintaining through the night. And then back into Friday afternoon, a little less coverage. You see that showing up. Other models kind of agree with this, so we'll probably see a little bit less in the way of severe weather as we go into Friday. And then a trough works in later on, and eventually we'll get back into a regime where potentially severe weather moves back into at least portions of the eastern seaboard. Looking out as we go on into the weekend, how the weekend will play out. I always like to show this as we get close to the weekend. We've got that trough working in to the Great Lakes, providing cooler temperatures up here, bringing a little bit of a cold front, extra energy in as we go on in through. So we'll probably see severe weather up in the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley area as we get on into Saturday and Sunday. There's that trough. Flow out ahead of that trough will keep it moist in the east, so it's going to feel hot and muggy most of the weekend. If we take a look here at the future radar, this is the Europeans' depiction of what might happen. Really, out here from Minnesota on down through northern Texas and east is where we're going to find the highest threat for rain this weekend. So you'll have to dodge showers and thunderstorms. No big low pressure systems or anything where it's going to rain the weekend out, but certainly if you have afternoon plans, you can see how things kind of fire up along that boundary from Texas all the way up into the Great Lakes. And the northern part of that makes some progress through, so that'll continue to progress east. The southern part of it probably gets hung up and we don't see a lot of penetration to drier air, but certainly up here around the Great Lakes, eventually as we head through the weekend into Monday, a little bit of drier air up here, and so you'll see temperatures knocking back and it'll feel a little bit better too. And here's the depiction of temperatures, how that will sort of play out as we go on through the weekend. So Saturday, look at this little blob of cooler air working in, warm along the coasts, and then that'll continue to progress eastward as we head through the weekend. So the plains feeling a little bit better, a little drying off up here in the Great Lakes as well. Sunday afternoon going to be warm up and down the west coast, Pacific Northwest, northern plains, and up and down the east coast, a little bit warmer than normal too. So that'll all progress, continue that little push east as we go through the week. Looking at the beaches this weekend, here's what I'm showing you here. I've showed this before. If you're heading out to the beach, just know that you may have to have an umbrella handy along the southeast coast down to Florida, down to the Gulf occasionally. It's not going to be a washout down there. This is 24-hour rainfall probabilities over essentially, so you get 24 hours from 8 p.m. Friday to 8 p.m. Saturday, showing you where you may receive at least a tenth of an inch of rain. You have high probabilities here along the coast. A lot of this will be due to activity early in the period. So probably Saturday, you're going to have some shower and thunderstorm chances along, say, from the Delmarva region down toward Florida and around. But I'm not looking at a washout, just higher chances of showers there. And the same again on Saturday, or Sunday rather, although less. This is the period from Saturday evening at 8 to Sunday evening at 8. So Sunday will be a better day all around with lower probabilities for precipitation. Temperatures, looking at temperatures as we go on through here, I'll get on display, we can see this. Beach is looking pretty good. 70s up north, 80s as you get along toward the south, a few 90s down in Florida, but mostly upper 80s on Saturday. You can see the rest of the nation here. Look at that cooler temperatures coming in behind that trough that we looked at. Knocking temperatures still warm in the southwest. Going to be very, very hot through here. Eastern sections of the northwest hot too. And then as we get on into Sunday, beach is looking still pretty good. A little warmer in spots. Maybe we're seeing more 80s and upper 80s and 90s, particularly down here in Florida along the Gulf Coast. So not too bad. That sea breeze will keep things cool off for you. But up here in the north, chilly out here, and California, chilly out here too. Till you get back into the desert southwest where it continues to be unrelentingly hot, okay? Heat coming back into the plains so you don't get a break for too long. But what about next week? As we get on out into next week, check this out. So let's do it this way. I want to show you the flow pattern first, and then we can look at the temperature sort of profile. But look at the flow pattern as we get on out into next Monday, okay? Watch this. Watch what happens. Ridge building up here in the Great Lakes. Going to be warm in the east with this big ridge poking in. You see that? But look what's happening up here in Canada as we get on out toward midweek. Big trough. Looks like it gets together, works across the northern tier, and drags a cold front. A cold front would be kind of lined up with this trough, at least for the northern section. So we could see some nice cooling middle of the country as we get on in toward the week. Another trough working in. GFS kind of agrees with this too. Normally I show the ensembles because they just sort of, you got, in the European world, you get 51 different members that are merged together to give you a better picture, kind of smooths out errors. Assumptions are made when these models are run, and we assume different things going on in the atmosphere because we can't measure the entirety of the atmosphere. And so all of those assumptions get pushed forward as the model thinks about the future, and those initial assumptions get, any errors there get magnified out in time. So if you have 51 models brought together to an ensemble mean, it helps to smooth out that error. And if you can see agreement across ensemble suites, that's even better. But looking at this, we see a little bit more in the way of energy moving across the northern tier. So we're going to see bouts of severe weather out in time. Cooler temperatures as we go out to, look at this, as that trough works in next week, mid next week, boom, look at this, very, very chilly air relative to normal, and the northern plains dipping in here, probably out ahead of this organized severe weather working in toward next week. We get toward the middle and end of next week. Big warm up here in the northeast particularly, and then that cool weather, that front will get right down to the southeast, probably get on the doorstep and not make it all the way in. And there you have it, it'll move on off, and that's getting out into la la land. But the Climate Prediction Center is already looking at the possibility here and seeing a big risk of below normal temperatures for the nation's midsection, July the 15th through the 19th, above normal in the east, much above in the northeast, much above in the northwest, and then much above northern Hawaii, much below Hawaii, Alaska, and much below, it's early, and I still can't get this right, much below southern Alaska and above for Hawaii. And there's your precipitation anomalies. Much of the nation east of the Pacific, coast, and Intermountain West is above normal, above in Alaska, and near normal in Hawaii. And so that's what's going on weather-wise. A couple of other quick tidbits. Watching Mount Rainier here. Whoa, let's scroll it down and we can see. So we'll zoom in on it and drag it over in the middle of the screen. Not much activity going on the last 2 hours, the last 2 days where we saw that big swarm, but it looks like it's dying off, which I guess is good news and probably typical for one of those swarms. So I wanted to keep you up to date on it. Everything else going on here, very quiet with the sun. Look at this KP index all the way down below 1. It's very, very, very quiet. Seen a few C to M class solar flares. Looking at the actual sun itself, trans-equatorial hole is facing us almost dead on now, so we'll expect to see solar winds kick up out of that and increase and enhance the solar wind stream. So we may see low in geomagnetic storm conditions. We're looking at sunspots coming in too. This one particularly is interesting because it's big, it's growing, it's complex. You see the magnetism complexity here with reds and blues kind of interspersed a bit. So we're watching that for solar flaring. It's seen some. And today is a full moon, folks. 99.7% moonrise tonight at 9:06 p.m. I think this is East Coast time. And so that's what we're looking at. Here's your moon table, but it is a buck moon, full moon. Weird things happen sometimes in full moons, folks. So pay attention to that. Be aware of it. If you see anything weird, report it to your local authorities. Okay? Anyway, that's it, folks. That's it for the show today. I hope things have been informative for you. I hope you have a wonderful day. Pray for us. We'll pray for you. Like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed yet. Share it with friends and family. And hopefully we'll be back tomorrow. I definitely will be back tomorrow with kind of a full episode with weather IQ and all that good stuff. So take care and have a wonderful day. We'll see you soon.